For centuries ago, this land had no flag, no name on a map that mattered to Europe, and no idea what it was about to become. Somewhere between a muddy river settlement and a launch pad sending humans to the stars, a nation was born, broken, and rebuilt more times than anyone could count. Stand on this shoreline in 1607, and you would see nothing but forest stretching to the horizon, smoke rising from Powhatan villages that had thrived here for generations, and 3 small ships anchoring in a river that would soon carry a new name. What happened next would not be a simple story of discovery. It would be a story of hunger and ambition, of freedom promised and freedom denied, of a wilderness turned into the most powerful nation on earth. This is the story of how that happened, and it begins with a swamp nobody wanted. The English called it Jamestown, and it very nearly did not survive its first winter. Malaria, starvation, and desperate conflict with indigenous nations pushed the colony to the edge of collapse more than once. Bodies were buried under cover of darkness so the dying wouldn't lose hope. Yet the settlers held on, driven by the promise of tobacco, a crop that would soon reshape the entire economy of the New World. Further north, in 1620, a different kind of colony took root. The Mayflower brought Puritans seeking not gold but religious freedom, landing on a coast already home to the Wampanoag people, whose knowledge of the land would mean the difference between survival and extinction for the newcomers. Their alliance, fragile and unequal, planted the seeds of a mythology that would outlive the truth behind it. Over the next century, 13 colonies stretched along the Atlantic coast, each with its own character. Puritan meeting houses in New England, plantation manors in the Chesapeake, bustling ports in Philadelphia and New York, where ships from a dozen nations traded goods, ideas, and increasingly, enslaved human beings. By the 1730s, the institution of slavery had become woven into the economic fabric of the colonies, a moral wound that would fester for centuries. Tension had been building for decades, but it was a war that lit the fuse. The French and Indian War left Britain drowning in debt, and King George's solution was simple: stamp taxes, tea taxes, laws passed an ocean away, with no colonial voice in the room. Then came the night in 1773 when men disguised as Mohawk warriors dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. It was theater and it was rebellion, and the British response would be brutal. Ports closed, troops occupied, and on a green in Lexington in April of 1775, someone fired a shot whose origin remains debated to this day. It didn't matter who fired first. What mattered was that there was no turning back now. For 8 grueling years, a ragtag colonial army faced the most powerful military on the planet. Valley Forge nearly froze them into non-existence. Betrayal and near collapse haunted every campaign. But French support and a stunning encirclement at Yorktown in 1781 finally broke Britain's will to fight. In 1783, the impossible became official. 13 colonies were now a nation, though what kind of nation remained an open, dangerous question. A constitution was written in secret, in a stifling Philadelphia room where delegates argued for months over how much power a government should hold and who exactly counted as a citizen. The document they produced was revolutionary and deeply compromised, enshrining liberty on one page and enslavement on the next. The young nation expanded with staggering speed. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled its size overnight. Wagon trains rolled west, pushing the frontier further with each decade, and with every mile gained, indigenous nations were pushed further into loss, culminating in forced removals like the Trail of Tears in the 1830s, where thousands died on marches they never chose to take. Beneath the expansion, a fault line widened. The North industrialized, filling with factories, immigrants, and abolitionist fervor. The South entrenched itself around the brutal economics of enslaved labor. Compromise after compromise tried to paper over the divide, but by 1860, the paper had worn through completely. War came to a country that had been avoiding it for 50 years. Over 4 catastrophic years, brother fought brother in fields that became mass graves. Gettysburg, Antietam, Shiloh, the names would echo for generations, marking the deadliest conflict in American history, with losses so staggering they still stand unmatched today. In the middle of the bloodshed, Abraham Lincoln reframed the war's purpose entirely. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't just aim to preserve a union. It aimed to end an institution built on human suffering. When the Confederacy finally surrendered in 1865, 4 million enslaved people were legally free, though freedom on paper and freedom in practice would remain two very different things for a century to come. Reconstruction tried, and largely failed, to rebuild the South on new foundations. Violence, political betrayal, and the rise of new systems of oppression replaced the old ones almost seamlessly. The wound of slavery had not healed. It had simply changed shape. America rebuilt itself into something almost unrecognizable. Railroads stitched the continent together. Steel mills and factories devoured immigrant labor by the millions. People arriving from Ireland, Italy, China, and Eastern Europe, crowding into cities that grew faster than anyone could plan for. Skyscrapers began climbing into the sky in a way no civilization had attempted before. Then the world came crashing in. The First World War pulled America onto the global stage. A decade of jazz-fueled prosperity followed, before the stock market collapsed in 1929 and plunged the nation into the Great Depression, an economic wound so deep it would take a second, even larger catastrophe to fully heal. That catastrophe arrived in December of 1941, when Pearl Harbor was bombed and America entered the deadliest war in human history. Factories that once built cars now built bombers. Millions of men shipped overseas, while women stepped into industrial roles once considered unthinkable for them. By 1945, America emerged from the ashes of global war as something it had never been before, a superpower. Victory brought prosperity, but also a new kind of fear. The Soviet Union and the United States squared off in a decades-long standoff that never quite became open war, but never truly felt like peace either. Nuclear anxiety hummed beneath everyday life, even as suburbs expanded and television sets flickered on in living rooms across the country. But prosperity was not shared equally, and the pressure of that inequality exploded into the streets. The civil rights movement forced America to confront the promises it had broken since its founding. Marches, boycotts, assassinations. By the late 1960s, the country looked less like a unified nation and more like a battlefield of competing visions for what America should be. Vietnam divided the country further. A war fought abroad and protested fiercely at home. Yet through the turmoil, America also reached further than any nation ever had. Landing astronauts on the surface of the moon in 1969, a single image broadcast to the entire watching world. The Cold War finally ended in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, leaving America as the world's lone superpower. A decade of relative calm followed, one that would end abruptly on a clear September morning in 2001. Two towers fell in New York City, and the sense of safety that had defined a generation fell with them. Wars in Afghanistan and Iraq stretched on for 2 decades, reshaping how America saw its place in the world. Meanwhile, a technological revolution was quietly rewriting daily life. Smartphones, social media, a financial crisis in 2008 that shook the global economy to its foundation. A pandemic in 2020 would test the nation in ways few had imagined, closing cities, straining hospitals, and reshaping how millions worked and connected. Through it all, the country kept arguing with itself the way it always had, about who belonged, who decided, and what freedom actually meant in practice. And by 2030, 423 years after 3 small ships anchored in a Virginia river, the nation those settlers could never have imagined stands as one of the most powerful and contradictory forces the world has ever seen. From a starving colony on the edge of a continent to a nation capable of reaching other worlds, this is a story that was never simple and never finished. Wars were fought over its meaning. Millions suffered so its promises might one day apply to everyone. And still, generation after generation, it kept rebuilding itself again and again out of its own wreckage. History never truly disappears. It just waits for the next chapter to be written. If you enjoyed this journey through American history, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. And let us know in the comments, which country or city should we explore next?